was in Broadway, and that wasn't on the original concept album. So that was all put together by
Norman Jewison. Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber are the ones who are, famous for putting this together. Without Tim and Andrew, this would not have ever happened. But they were designing a rock opera album. They honestly had no thoughts about a show, live stage production, nor a film. They wanted to get into the rock opera business because The Who had done so well with Tommy, and they put this all together. And it was, as you know, tremendously successful. And Norman Jewison was a big fan of that album. Immediately bought it and listened to it constantly. And the more he listened to it, the more he decided he was going to make a film. And not only did he produce and direct this, but he wrote the screenplay based upon the album. And they were in Israel. Norman and his production staff were there scouting locations for almost 6 months before any of us arrived. And during that process, they were on the shore of the Dead Sea one day having their lunch. And when you sit in a certain place on the west side of the Dead Sea, you can literally see all the way back to California. It's just, the visual is amazing. Mountains and desert and all that. And he's having his sandwich, and he glanced over to the left, and way off in the distance, there was a bus coming toward where he was, bringing people who were vacationing in Israel to see the Dead Sea. And what is it called?
It's called a jitney bus, which is pretty like a taxi bus.
Yeah, and people can just ride the bus and go there as long as you want, and they'll bring you back. So he thought, that's a great way to get the cast in. So that's why he put us all on a bus to come in. And the bus came in and we did our thing. And people have asked me for years why at the end of the movie, when everybody gets back on the bus, because Norman wanted everybody to know we were a group of actors and singers and dancers who were traveling around doing this show. We're not the real people. We're going to perform our show for you now, and then he made a movie at that. So he wanted us all to get back on the bus to show that's the actors, they're leaving now. But he and I both really took issue with the fact that there's no really essence of resurrection in the album, and certainly not in what was the beginning idea of the story. And we talked at length with Tim and Andrew about the process of showing that, and they said, well, we're not trying to be terrible, but we really want to save that for part 2. And here we are 45 years later and waiting for part 2 to happen. But we thought, honestly, we felt that if I were to get back on the bus, it would be really anti-spiritual. In fact, his phrase to me was, it'll be like Elvis getting off the stage, Thank you very much. So we decided it would be better for me not to get on the bus. And Frank has a little something to say about that.
Well, my idea, I was going to do a special effect, but never mind. We'll save it for Cleveland.
So as I was saying,
take 2. Forget what we just said 2 seconds ago. Okay, go.
This would be take 2. I'm going to roll it back.
This is unrehearsed, by the way, people.
And we were talking, Mr. Jewison and I, about the fact that I shouldn't get on the bus because of the spiritual essence that would destroy, you see. Because we... And that's why. Because there's guys like Frank everywhere who would do that, you see.
No, so listen. If you guys don't know, all right, I'm the biggest Twilight Zone Rod Serling fan in the world. And he used to teach class, no kidding, a couple of blocks away in the early 60s while he was doing the Twilight Zone. Yeah. Right? Just literally a couple blocks away. And every time I come here, I always go down there and I look at his papers and stuff. And it's still there. They have archives and stuff. It's really cool. I think after doing 200 of these things around the country, I think the mystical mythology of Jesus Christ Superstar, the movie, has a lot to do with the fact that you don't get on the bus at the end of the film. Because, right? Because what if you would have gotten, let's say, on the bus, like if you would have walked up with Carl and put your arm around Carl and got on the bus, I don't think it would have had the same effect that it has to this day. Was there any discussion about that?
Extreme discussion about that, yes. And the whole idea was we wanted to show the essence of resurrection, however we could do it cinematically. But Tim and Andrew just really honestly said they didn't want that to happen. Please don't do that. So Mr. Jewison, what he decided to do was at least at the very end to have a magnificent shot of the cross in the sunset. So when the film finishes and before the credits start to roll, the last thing you see is that image. 70mm Panavision with just the cross in the sunset, and he continually pulls away for miles and miles and miles. And if you haven't seen it, you'll see it today. And when that moment happens, please don't get up and run. Stay there until the credits after they start to roll, because the very last visual you see is that cross in the sunset, and it's in the desert. It's all dark above and below except for the sunlight and the cross right there. Well, start looking right over in that corner and watch what happens across the bottom of the screen. And I promise you, we had nothing whatsoever to do with that. Norman and the crew were at least 200 yards away with that 70mm Panavision camera shooting the cross. And we didn't even see it until we screened it a few days later just to see what had happened with that. And we saw this image happen. And it's the shepherd and the flock walking shadow all the way across the bottom of the screen. So what better show than the essence of the shepherd and the flock? That resurrection, spiritual resurrection happened. So Norman Jewison, I remember when we screened it, he said, I just want all of you to know, cast, crew, everybody, that's not a special effect. He said, I contacted that great director in the sky. He did it.
Let's hear it for Norman Jewison, huh? Let's hear it.